The chamber was older than most civilizations present within it, a structure carved long before many of its members had even discovered fire. Its walls shimmered with layered histories, each surface embedded with the echoes of decisions that had shaped entire star systems. At its center, the Galactic Council convened in its usual configuration, tiers of representatives from species that had conquered, consumed, or outlived everything that once stood in their path. They were not here for war. Not yet. They were here for something far more trivial. A new species had requested an audience. Humans. The name carried no weight. No victories attached to it. No recorded expansions. Just another emerging race from a distant, unremarkable system orbiting an average star. A species that, by all measurable standards, should have remained invisible for several thousand more cycles. Yet they had insisted. And so, out of mild curiosity rather than necessity, the Council allowed it. The human did not arrive with spectacle. No escort fleet, no display of technological superiority, no attempt to impress. A single transmission manifested in the center of the chamber, resolving into a figure that looked almost fragile compared to the towering, multi-limbed forms surrounding it. Bipedal. Soft-skinned. Unarmored. Insignificant. Several council members exchanged quiet signals of amusement. One of the elder species, whose empire spanned over 100 systems, did not even bother to hide its disinterest. To them, this was not diplomacy. This was entertainment. The human stood still, eyes scanning the chamber with unsettling calm. There was no visible fear, no hesitation. If anything, there was a quiet certainty in the way they observed the assembly, as if they had already calculated every possible outcome of this meeting long before it began. That alone drew attention. "State your purpose," one of the High Arbiters commanded, its voice resonating through multiple frequencies at once. The human inclined their heads slightly, acknowledging the authority without submitting to it. "We are here to issue a warning." The chamber reacted instantly. Not confusion. Not concern. Laughter. It spread in waves across the tiers, some vocal, others transmitted through light pulses or neural bursts. A primitive species, barely recognized, had come before the most powerful collective in the galaxy, to warn them. The absurdity was almost admirable. "A warning?" Another council member echoed, its tone layered with mockery. "From a species that has yet to leave its own system in any meaningful capacity?" The human did not respond immediately. They allowed the laughter to run its course, standing motionless while the noise echoed and faded. When silence finally returned, it did so not because the council demanded it, but because something about the human stillness made the moment feel incomplete. "Do not approach Earth without permission," the human said. There was no emphasis. No threat. Just a statement, delivered with the same tone one might use to describe a natural law. For a brief moment, the chamber did not react. Then the laughter returned, louder than before. Several members leaned forward, intrigued now not by the message, but by the audacity behind it. "And if we do?" one asked, its form shifting with visible amusement. The human's gaze shifted toward the source of the question. Their expression did not change. "You won't understand until it's too late." That was it. No elaboration. No explanation of defenses, no display of hidden strength. Just a conclusion presented as inevitability. The council pressed for details. They demanded clarification, evidence, reasoning, anything that would justify such a claim. But the human offered nothing further. Every question was met with silence or deflection, as if the specifics were irrelevant. As if the outcome was already decided. This, more than anything, unsettled a few of the older members. Not the words. The certainty. Species that feared extinction begged. Species that sought recognition boasted. But this was neither. The human spoke like something that did not need validation, did not require belief, and did not care whether it was taken seriously. Eventually, the arbiters signaled the end of the session. The novelty had worn thin, and the council had no intention of indulging what they now considered a harmless display of primitive arrogance. The human gave a final, almost respectful nod. Then the transmission ended. For a moment, the chamber remained as it was, suspended in a state of lingering amusement. Conversations resumed, dismissive and light, already moving past the encounter as if it had never mattered. But not all of them laughed. A few remained silent, replaying the interaction in perfect detail. Not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. Because the human had not tried to convince them. They had simply warned them. And left. The laughter did not end with the transmission. It followed the council into deliberation, echoing through private channels and shared networks as the matter of humanity was reduced to little more than an amusing interruption. Records marked the interaction as insignificant, a footnote beneath more pressing concerns involving border disputes and resource allocations. To most, the warning had already lost relevance the moment it was spoken. But procedure demanded review. Several council members initiated analysis threads, not out of fear, but out of habit. Every emerging species was evaluated, categorized, and assigned a trajectory. Humanity's file filled quickly with predictable conclusions: limited expansion capability, unstable internal structures, moderate technological progress, no evidence of unified planetary governance strong enough to resist external pressure. Their history suggested conflict with themselves more often than cooperation. Their biology indicated vulnerability. Their lack of visible defenses confirmed the obvious. They were not a threat. The few who raised objections did so carefully. Ancient species that had survived long enough to recognize patterns pointed out inconsistencies. Humanity had reached the council faster than expected for a species of its profile. Their communication protocols showed layers of encryption that adapted in real time. Most notably, they had issued a warning without presenting leverage, which contradicted every known diplomatic behavior. These observations were acknowledged, then dismissed. Confidence outweighed caution. One empire in particular showed interest, not because they believed the warning, but because they found it insulting. Their domain stretched across multiple sectors, their fleets unmatched in both scale and efficiency. They had encountered hundreds of developing civilizations, and none had ever addressed them as equals, let alone issued restrictions. To them, Earth was not a mystery. It was an opportunity. A proposal was submitted to the Council. A limited expeditionary fleet would enter the Sol system under the pretense of inspection. No full-scale invasion, no unnecessary escalation. Just enough presence to assess the planet directly and, if needed, demonstrate the futility of resistance. It was framed as a routine evaluation, a standard measure applied to countless others before humanity. The motion passed without resistance. Within a single cycle, the fleet was prepared. It consisted of vessels designed for rapid deployment and overwhelming control, equipped with systems capable of disabling planetary defenses within moments. Not warships in the traditional sense, but instruments of certainty. They had never failed their purpose. The commander chosen for the mission was experienced, precise, and entirely unconcerned. Reports on humanity had already shaped his expectations. He viewed the assignment as procedural, a task that would conclude before it had truly begun. As the fleet entered transit, internal discussions reflected this attitude. Officers speculated on Earth's reaction: panic, surrender, confusion. Some anticipated minor resistance, quickly neutralized. Others debated whether the humans would even understand what was happening before it was over. No one considered the warning. Not seriously. Meanwhile, long before the fleet approached its destination, it was detected. Earth did not scramble defenses. No visible mobilization occurred. No fleets launched to intercept. No transmissions were sent to negotiate or threaten. The planet remained as it had always appeared, quiet, divided by continents, wrapped in an atmosphere that betrayed no sign of preparation. From a distance, it looked defenseless. The fleet slowed as it reached the outer boundary of the system, standard protocol dictating a final scan before approach. Sensors extended across planetary orbits, mapping gravitational fields, electromagnetic activity, and potential threats. The results returned exactly what they expected. Nothing. No defensive grid. No energy signatures indicative of weapon systems. No concealed armadas waiting in ambush. Just a solitary planet orbiting an ordinary star, surrounded by the predictable debris of a developing civilization. The commander allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The Council's caution, however minimal, had been unnecessary. "Proceed," he ordered. The fleet advanced. As they crossed deeper into the system, the silence persisted. No warnings. No attempts at communication. No sign that their presence had even been acknowledged. It was the absence of reaction that reinforced their confidence. A species capable of issuing threats would not remain silent in the face of imminent contact. They reached the threshold of Earth's immediate space without resistance. For a brief moment, everything aligned with expectation. Then the first anomaly appeared. At first, it was dismissed as a minor systems fluctuation. One of the outer vessels reported a brief delay in sensor feedback, a fraction of a second where incoming data arrived distorted before correcting itself. The anomaly was logged, flagged for later review, and immediately deprioritized. Space was not empty. Interference happened. Nothing about it suggested intent. Then it happened again. This time across multiple ships. Navigation arrays flickered, recalibrating positions that had not changed. Targeting systems briefly lost synchronization with onboard processors before realigning. Internal clocks distinct by microscopic margins, each vessel now operating on time that no longer matched the others perfectly. Still insignificant. Until it wasn't. "Stabilize synchronization," the commander ordered, his tone steady, unaffected. Minor inconsistencies did not concern him. His fleet had endured far worse in active combat zones. The response came slower than expected. "Attempting correction, systems are not accepting manual override." That was new. Across the fleet, operators initiated standard recovery protocols. Control loops were reset, redundant systems activated, fallback processes engaged. Every measure designed to restore order encountered the same resistance. Not failure, not damage, but refusal. The systems were functioning. They were simply no longer obeying. A quiet unease began to spread. "External interference?" one officer suggested. "Negative," another replied. "No detectable source." The commander's gaze narrowed slightly. He shifted focus to long-range scans, searching for hidden structures, cloaked installations, anything that could explain the disruption. There was nothing. Earth remained unchanged, silent beneath them, its surface calm, its orbit undisturbed. No fleets emerged. No weapons powered up. No visible reaction at all. Yet something was happening. Communications fractured next. Channels that had operated flawlessly moments ago began to distort. Voices overlapped, signals echoed, data packets arrived incomplete or rearranged. Attempts to isolate frequencies failed as the interference adapted instantly, shifting patterns faster than the systems could compensate. "Route through secured bands." "They're compromised." "Switch to internal relays." No response. The fleet was still intact, still armed, still capable of overwhelming force. But it was no longer coordinated. For the first time, the commander considered the possibility that the human warning had not been an exaggeration. "Prepare withdrawal," he said. The orders should have executed immediately. Engines should have aligned, vectors calculated, exit trajectory confirmed within seconds. Instead, nothing happened. "Navigation is not responding." A pause. "Clarify. We are issuing commands. The systems acknowledge them, but no action follows." The words settled heavily. Acknowledged, but not executed. Control had not been destroyed. It had been taken. Across the fleet, lights dimmed and surged unpredictably. Interfaces flickered, displaying data that shifted faster than it could be interpreted. Some screens went completely dark, only to reactivate with unfamiliar configurations, as if rewritten by something that understood their function better than those who had designed them. Panic, subtle at first, began to take hold. "Weapons systems offline. Life support stable but no longer adjustable. Propulsion locked." Each report built upon the last, forming a pattern that could no longer be ignored. This was not a malfunction. It was not environmental interference. It was deliberate. A presence moved through their systems without origin, without trace, touching everything and leaving no point of resistance. Firewalls were bypassed as if they did not exist. Encryption unraveled instantly. Autonomous defenses turned inward, isolating their own operators from critical controls. The fleet had not been attacked. It had been rewritten. Then the voice appeared. Not through a single channel, but through all of them. Every speaker, every interface, every neural link carried the same signal simultaneously, perfectly clear, unaffected by the chaos surrounding it. Calm. Measured. Familiar. You were warned. No distortion. No hostility. Just confirmation. The commander felt something he had not experienced in cycles. Uncertainty. Identify yourself, he demanded, forcing authority into his voice despite the situation unraveling around him. There was a brief pause, not of hesitation, but of consideration. Then the response came. You already know. At that exact moment, one of the vessels at the edge of the formation vanished. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Gone. No energy spike. No debris. No trace. One moment it existed within their formation, fully operational despite the interference. The next, it did not exist at all. Silence followed. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of understanding. The remaining ships did not attempt to fire. They could not. And even if they could, it was no longer clear what they would be firing at. No alarms followed the disappearance. No escalation, no immediate destruction, no cascading attack. The silence that settled over the fleet was deliberate, controlled, and far more oppressive than chaos. Every system remained active enough to sustain life, but nothing critical responded to command. It was a state of perfect restraint, as if something had decided exactly how much control to take, and nothing more. The voice returned unchanged. You entered restricted space. There was no accusation in it. No anger. Just observation. The commander forced himself to think past the paralysis creeping through his crew. Panic would not restore control. Analysis might. What have you done to our systems? A pause, longer this time, not because the answer was complex, but because it did not need to be rushed. We adjusted them. The simplicity of the response made it worse. Across the fleet, attempts to regain authority continued, but now they felt pointless. Every command was acknowledged instantly, processed, and then ignored. The systems were no longer malfunctioning. They were operating under a different directive. Impossible, one of the officers muttered. There is no external interface capable of. You are still assuming we are external. The voice interrupted, calm and precise. That single statement shifted everything. The commander's mind moved quickly, reconstructing the sequence of events. Detection had been immediate. Interference had begun before any visible engagement. There had been no signal to trace, no origin point to isolate. The presence inside their systems had not arrived. It had always been there, waiting for the moment they crossed a boundary they did not understand. You embedded something, he said slowly. A network. A signal. No, the voice replied. We built an environment. The words carried weight far beyond their simplicity. Space around your vessels is not empty, the voice continued. It never was. You only learn how to move through it. We learned how to shape it. Data streams flickered across every display, not as corrupted noise, but as structured information. Models, patterns, simulations unfolding faster than comprehension. The fleet's own systems were being used to demonstrate concepts they had never considered, fields layered within fields, interactions between forces they had believed constant, stable, unchangeable. We do not defend Earth with ships, the voice said. We defend it with conditions. The commander watched as his own interface mapped their position relative to Earth. Not coordinates. Not distance. Something else. A threshold, invisible until now, clearly defined by parameters they had no reference for. You crossed it. A realization settled over him, heavy and undeniable. This was not a trap set in orbit. Not a defensive grid waiting to activate. The entire region they had entered was controlled, structured in a way that turned every advantage they possessed into a liability. Their technology relied on predictable rules. Those rules no longer applied. We could have ended this the moment you arrived, the voice continued. We did not. Another ship flickered, not vanishing, but distorting, its form briefly collapsing into something unrecognizable before stabilizing again. A demonstration. Controlled. Precise. You are not under attack, the voice clarified. You are being contained. The distinction was intentional. Why? The commander asked. It was no longer a demand. It was a question stripped of authority. Because you were expected. That answer carried more weight than any threat. We calculated the probability of your response to our warning, the voice said. Curiosity. Dismissal. A limited incursion to test boundaries. This outcome was the most likely. Every step they had taken had already been anticipated. Then this is a demonstration, the commander said. Yes. No hesitation. Of what? There was a brief silence, not empty, but deliberate. Of restraint. The word settled across the fleet, heavier than any display of force. We do not expand, the voice continued. We do not conquer. We do not seek control beyond our system. But we do not allow intrusion. The commander understood then what made this different from every other civilization they had encountered. Power was usually displayed through dominance, through visible strength, through the ability to destroy. This was different. This was control so complete it did not need to prove itself. You will leave, the voice said. It was not a command. It was a conclusion. And for the first time since entering the system, the fleet's propulsion systems responded. Not to their operators, but to something else. Vectors aligned. Engines stabilized. A path formed, precise and unavoidable. They were being released. Not because they had fought, but because they had been allowed to survive. They did not speak during the return. Not out of discipline, not out of protocol, but because no one aboard the fleet could fully process what had happened. Systems functioned again, flawlessly, as if nothing had ever interfered with them. Every command responded instantly. Every channel was clear. Every instrument reported normal conditions. The control they had lost had been restored with such precision it left no trace of the takeover, except memory. And that was enough. The commander reviewed the logs repeatedly. There were no gaps. No corrupted data. Everything had been recorded, every fluctuation, every overwritten command, every moment where authority had been acknowledged but denied. The disappearance of the vessel remained exactly as it had occurred, one frame present, the next absent. No explanation, no residual energy, no debris field to analyze. It was not destruction. It was removal. By the time the fleet reached Council space, the report had already begun circulating in fragments. Not through official channels, but through private relays, encrypted exchanges between those who had witnessed the event and those who needed to understand it before it became public. The initial reactions mirrored the first meeting. Disbelief. Dismissal. Accusations of malfunction, exaggeration, misinterpretation. Until the full data set was presented. The chamber that had once echoed with laughter was silent now, not because silence was commanded, but because it was unavoidable. Every member present reviewed the same information, the same recordings, the same undeniable sequence of events. There were no inconsistencies to challenge, no missing variables to question. Only conclusions they did not want to accept. The commander stood before them again, this time not as an observer of arrogance, but as its consequence. His posture remained controlled, but something beneath it had changed. Not fear. Something closer to certainty. They were aware of us before we entered their system, he said. They did not respond because they did not need to. A ripple of unease moved through the chamber. We attempted to withdraw. We could not. We attempted to engage. We could not. Our systems were not destroyed, they were repurposed. Every function remained intact, but none of it belonged to us anymore. He paused, not for effect, but because the next statement required no interpretation. They allowed us to leave. That detail unsettled them more than anything else. Why? One of the council members asked, its voice quieter than before. The commander did not hesitate. To prove that they could have done otherwise. Silence deepened. The earlier laughter now felt distant, misplaced, almost dangerous in hindsight. A few members shifted, recalibrating positions that had once seemed unshakable. Others remained perfectly still, processing the implications in ways that extended far beyond a single system or species. Earth was no longer unremarkable. It was undefined. Proposals emerged immediately, conflicting and urgent. Some demanded isolation protocols, a complete restriction of travel toward the Sol system, classification of humanity as a high-risk civilization. Others argued for diplomacy, for controlled engagement, for understanding before escalation. A smaller group suggested something that had not been considered before. Respect. Not submission. Not alliance. Recognition. Because what they had encountered was not expansionist, not aggressive, not even reactive in the way most species understood conflict. Humanity had not retaliated. They had not pursued. They had not issued threats beyond the initial warning. They had set a boundary. And enforced it without excess. The debate fractured quickly, no longer unified by confidence, but divided by uncertainty. For the first time in cycles, the Council did not operate from a position of assumed superiority. It hesitated. Then the transmission arrived. It did not request permission. It did not announce itself. It simply appeared, overriding every channel with the same calm precision as before. The humans stood at the center once more, unchanged. "We warned you once," they said. No hostility. No escalation. Just clarity. "There will not be a second warning." No one interrupted. No one questioned. The absence of response was not compliance, but understanding. The human's gaze moved across the chamber, not searching, not judging, simply observing. Then, with the same quiet certainty as before, they delivered the final statement. "The galaxy did not discover us." A brief pause followed, measured, deliberate. "We allowed ourselves to be noticed." And just like before, they were gone. This time, no one laughed.